Okay, good morning and welcome to today's Finance Committee hearing. My name is Councilmember Daniel Drum and I'm the chair of the committee. I want to thank everyone for joining us today. We have been joined by Councilmember Barry Grudenchik, others will be, and Councilmember Powers. Today the committee will be hearing two pieces of legislation relating to payment agreements for people who owe property tax arrears. The first is proposed intro number 1143, sponsored by myself and Councilmember Yeager by request of the mayor. This bill will establish three new types of income-based installment agreements available to lower-income homeowners where the property is their primary residence. The second piece of legislation is a pre-considered intro sponsored by myself to authorize the Banking Commission to recommend in the council to adopt a property tax late payment interest rate that would be applicable to certain properties that are subject to an installment agreement where such agreement is current. Before I describe the bills in more detail, I want to thank the Department of Finance for working together with the council to bring today's bills to a hearing. These pieces of legislation are a product of the 2015 task force on the lien sale, which was a joint effort between representatives of the administration and the council. After meeting and working on the year-long task force, one of the final recommendations was to create ways to minimize the number of properties in the lien sale by allowing for affordable payment plans, lower interest rates, and flexibility when property owners work in good faith with the city to address their debt. This hearing has therefore been several years in the making, and I want to commend the Commissioner in particular for his leadership and advocacy on this issue. These programs are the first of their kind in the city, and they're going to help a lot of people who are struggling to pay their rising tax bills, property tax bills. Jumping into the specifics of the plans, currently, when a property owner owes property tax arrears, they can enter into an installment agreement with DOF in order to pay back the amount owed over time. These installment agreements will withdraw the property from an upcoming lien sale and can be entered into for a period of up to 10 years with as little as $0 in down payment. But the amount of each installment is calculated without regard to income or ability to pay, and property owners must remain current on all property taxes as they accrue. Moreover, interest continues to accrue on the unpaid amounts at the same rate of interest as they did prior to the execution of the agreement. As a result, many property owners cannot actually afford the payments on the agreements and end up defaulting, which bars them from entering into another payment plan for at least 5 years. According to the Department of Finance, the default rate in 2018 was 46.5%, meaning that nearly half of the people in installment agreements could not afford to keep up with them. In an effort to bring down the default rate and help homeowners stay current on their payment plans and out of the lien sale, intro number 1143 will establish 3 new installment agreements available to homeowners who earn $50,000 or less a year, own a Class 1, 1 to 3 family home, or a Class 2 condo, and use the home as their primary place of residence. The 3 new agreements will be as follows. 1, a senior installment agreement that allows seniors to defer a percentage or all of their property tax payments until death or the transfer of the property. 2, an income-based installment agreement that would allow eligible homeowners to make payments based on a percentage of their income for however long it takes to pay off their debt. And 3, an extenuating circumstances installment agreement that would allow a homeowner with an extenuating circumstance, like the loss of a job or the death of a contributing household member, to pay an amount based on a percentage of their income for a year or 2 until they get back on their feet. The second piece of legislation, the pre-considered intro, relates to the late payment interest rates. Currently, the Banking Commission must recommend 2 late payment interest rates to the council for the late payment of property taxes. One properties with assessed values of more than $250,000, and 1 properties with assessed value of $250,000 or less. For nearly 25 years, those rates remained at 18 and 9% respectively. But beginning in fiscal 2016, the council adopted a rate lower than the 9% in an attempt to ease the burden on property owners who were already struggling and to bring the interest rate charged by the city more in line with interest rates charged in other contexts. For the fiscal 2019, the adopted interest rates are 18% for the higher valued properties and 7% for the lower valued properties. However, despite this lower rate, interest continues to accrue more quickly than homeowners can pay, leading to a higher overall amount of payment over time and contributing to the high default rate on installment agreements. Moreover, all tax arrears owed to the city accrue interest at the same rate regardless of whether the property owner is making a good faith effort to address the debt by entering into an installment agreement with the city, or whether the property owner is taking no steps to pay the city what is owed. Therefore, this preconsidered intro would require the Banking Commission to recommend and allow the council to adopt a lower interest rate that would be applicable to properties with an assessed value of $250,000 or less that is subject to a valid payment agreement plan with DOF. This will create a greater incentive for people to enter into late payment plans and help them stay current on those plans so that they can successfully resolve their debt. Responsible homeowners who engage with the city to pay the money they owe should be rewarded for their efforts. This bill will accomplish that, while still ensuring that the city collects all the property taxes it is due and that any costs associated with the deferred payments are covered. The committee looks forward to hearing from the commissioner on both of these bills and to continue to work with him and his team to assist property owners with addressing their property tax burdens. So before we hear from the commissioner, Commissioner Jacques Gia and Deputy Commissioner Jeffrey Shear, I'd like to thank Rebecca Chasen, Stephanie Ruiz, Raymond Majewski, Emra Edev, Davis Winslow, and Mrs. Sarkissian from the Finance Division for the work in putting together today's hearing. And now we will hear from the Department of Finance after they are sworn in.
Do you affirm that your testimony will be truthful to the best of your knowledge, information, and belief?
Yes, I do. Good morning, Chair Drum and members of the Finance Committee. I'm joined today, as you said, by Jeffrey Shear, who is the Deputy Commissioner of Treasury and Payment Services at the New York City Department of Finance. We come before you today in support of legislation that will help low-income New Yorkers and seniors who are struggling to pay the property taxes and are at risk of losing their homes. Insure 1143 fulfills a promise made to the Council in 2017 when we requested that the Council extend the city's tax and sales authority. At the time, we told the Council that we would design a payment plan that would take into account New Yorkers' ability to pay and thereby help them stay out of the lien sale. The legislation before you today will do exactly that, with tremendous positive impacts for our most vulnerable property owners. First, let me give you some background on why these new payment agreements are so necessary. In the last 10 years, property values have skyrocketed in New York City as a result of a number of factors, including record employment growth and low interest rates. While this is good news for people who are selling their properties, it is not such good news for senior citizens and homeowners living on a fixed income. These are not people looking to flip their houses and make money. They want to stay in their neighborhoods and continue to contribute to their community. But as neighborhoods gentrify and development accelerates, their property values and therefore the taxes are rising while their income more or less remains the same. As a result, many vulnerable homeowners wind up in a lien sale. We know that the lien sale is an effective enforcement tool for the city. Voluntary compliance has greatly increased since its inception. Property tax delinquency has declined from an average of 4.4% to just 1.2% today. That is very important because each percentage point increase in voluntary compliance is worth about $260 million more in property tax collections. So the 3.2 percentage point difference results annually in $830 million of additional revenue to fund critical city services. But while the lien sale is effective, we want to do what we can to help seniors, single mothers, persons with disabilities, and others avoid becoming delinquent on their real property tax bills. That is why we have significantly increased our outreach efforts to keep property owners out of the lien sale, whether by enrolling them in payment plans or helping them apply for exemptions that can reduce the taxes and remove their properties from the lien sale. Over the past 3 years, we have averaged a total of about 3,900 liens sold, compared to an average of about 5,000 in the preceding 3 years, a decrease of 22%. As you know, under existing tax law, the Department of Finance offers a payment agreement that allows property owners who are behind on their property taxes to put as little as zero down and make payments of their delinquent taxes for a term of up to 10 years. However, the agreements require that owners pay all of their newly incurred charges as they come due each quarter, which is difficult for many property owners. For example, the median tax bill for a homeowner in 2017 was $4,447. While a homeowner may only have to pay a couple of $100 each quarter for the delinquent taxes, he or she must also pay an additional $1,100 per quarter to keep current. For some property owners, these requirements are hard to meet, which leads some to default on the agreements. Once an owner defaults on a payment plan agreement, he or she is ineligible for a new agreement for 5 years, unless there are extenuating circumstances such as a job loss or a death in the family, or unless the owner somehow manages to pay 20% of the total amount owed. Given the high default rate, a growing number of property owners are claiming extenuating circumstances for their defaulted agreement so that they may receive another agreement and keep the property out of the tax lien sale. Basically, it all adds up to this. New York City homeowners need relief, and this legislation will provide assistance to taxpayers who are experiencing hardship in paying their property taxes. The legislation creates 3 new payment plans that take into account homeowners' income and ability to pay. The plans will be available to condo and Class 1 homeowners and seniors who earn $50,000 or less. The new payment plans will allow homeowners not only to extend the repayment of their delinquent taxes, but to defer a portion of the current taxes until the home is sold or transferred to a new owner, at which point the city will collect with interest. In essence, the unpaid property taxes will be deferred, but not forgiven. The deferral amount is limited to 25% of the homeowner equity for Class 1 properties and 50% equity for condos. Interest on the unpaid property taxes will continue to accrue at 7% as established by current local law. Here is a summary of the 3 payment plans in the new legislation. The first one is the low-income senior plan, which will allow seniors to age in their homes. In order to qualify, Class 1 and condo owners must be 65 or older, earn less than $50,000, and reside in the property for at least 1 year. The taxpayer can choose to make monthly or quarterly payments of 0%, 25, 50, or 75% of back and prospective taxes. The second plan is a fixed-length income-based plan, which is for homeowners who face short-term financial difficulties. They must earn less than $50,000 and have resided at the property for at least 1 year. The homeowner can make monthly or quarterly payments of 2, 4, 6, or 8% of their income to pay back taxes plus a 1 year worth of current charges. The third plan is the extenuating circumstances income-based plan, which is for homeowners who meet the Department of Finance legal definition of extenuating circumstances. This includes the death or serious illness of the owner or an immediate family member, loss of income due to unemployment, or enrollment in the Department of Environmental Protection's Water Debt Assistance Program. Applicants must earn less than $50,000 and have resided at the property for at least 1 year. They can choose to pay 2, 4, 6, or 8% of their income to pay back taxes and current charges for as long as the extenuating circumstances persist. The tax default is capped at 25% of their equity in the property. We expect the new plans will be a more realistic options for people who are house rich but cash poor and have trouble paying the property taxes. We will market them aggressively by including information in our notices and bills. We will seek traditional and social media publicity, and we will host a series of outreach events throughout all 5 boroughs, including having joint sessions with council members and other elected officials. It is important to note that these payment agreements will not affect city revenues. Since the city accounts on an accrual basis, only cash flow will be impacted. Based on the experiences of other localities with similar programs, we estimate that the total amount of property taxes that will be deferred over a 10-year period will be approximately $14 million. We will collect the deferred property taxes via property closings or, as a last resort, via the tax lien sale process if the homeowner defaults on the agreement. Furthermore, the city's interest is protected by limiting the tax default amount to 25% of the owner's equity. In summary, this legislation is a win for everyone. The city will continue to collect the property taxes that fund its core services, while New Yorkers with limited means will be able to stay in their homes and the neighborhoods they love. We thank the Council for all you have done to help us reduce the number of homeowners in the lien sale and to reach the people and communities who need our help. Today, we ask you to join us in support of Intro 1143. Thank you, and I'd be more than happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. We appreciate your testimony, you coming in and working with us on this important piece of legislation. Let me just start off by saying currently the department offers a payment plan that is zero money down for up to 10 years, but without consideration of the property owner's ability to pay. How many of these payment plans are currently active?
I think we have an inventory of 3,400. Yeah.
And how can homeowners enter into installment agreements that are currently available? Do they do that in person or do they do it online? How does that work?
Currently, they have to go to one of our business centers to apply for one. Ultimately, we will move our application electronically so they could do it online.
Do you know when that will be up?
We are currently working on it. Yeah,
So
we
not
are
yet.
we are about to launch a new property tax system sometimes in January.
Okay.
Thereafter, we will work on it.
So January.
After January.
After January,
Yeah.
okay. Will all the methods and locations for enrollment into the current plans also exist for enrollment into these new agreements?
Yes.
So they'll all be, okay. All right, now you're proposing 3 different payment plans, one for seniors, one for property owners with extenuating circumstances, and one for a fixed period of time. How many properties do you estimate will participate in each of these payment programs each year?
At this moment in time, we don't have a good sense of how many people will participate in the program. But we are looking into this to have a better sense. But it's what I call parameter driven. It depends on outreach efforts. The more outreach we do, the more people we could reach. And I think after the first year, we'll have a better sense of how many people will register. But so far, we think probably going to be in line with what we have done historically.
Do you have an idea about how much tax revenue would be deferred?
So we, as I said in my testimony, we're looking over a 10-year period of about $14 million.
14 million, that's
Yeah.
right, exactly. Do you have a fiscal estimate for this bill?
Technically, it's not going to cause the city any, it's not going to have any fiscal impact on the city's revenue because, as I said, the city accounting is based on accrual accounting. So it's not when the tax revenue is, it's when the tax is accrued, not when it's, when the money comes into the city. So it's going to have a cash flow, but not a revenue per se on the city's revenue.
Do taxpayers have to be in default to enter into the agreement, or can they be used to address like future taxes?
Hopefully, we don't want people to be in default. It's like if you know for sure you're going to have some financial difficulties, it is an option for you before you get into a default position.
Can you describe the steps and the paperwork a property owner would have to do in order to enroll in the programs?
Well, let me defer to Jeff, who's involved more or less in the day-to-day administration of the plan. But so far, it's not going to be different, much more different than what we currently have. It is that because of it requires a lot more work, because the underwriting is going to be different than because it's linked to the property now. So therefore, we have to more or less follow a different sort of underwriting procedure. But that is, we have to look at the value of the property, estimate the value of the property, see how much equity that the property owner has in the property. And so all this is going to require some work, but I would defer to Jeff.
Just before we move to
in more
that,
detail.
will you be able to provide any in-person assistance
Oh, yes,
for
yes,
the homeowners? Okay.
yes.
Yes, so we plan to have the intake at our 5 business centers in each of the boroughs. We plan to have, as the commissioner said, a relatively easy application form, but we will have to do a little bit of work when it comes to verifying income and also verifying the equity in the property. So we will be asking people, once they've cleared the first hurdle, to have a title search report so we fully understand all of the potential liabilities against the property to calculate that. We also are currently working on what we're calling a payment terms calculator, so that when people do come in, they can see in advance what the full terms are of the agreement, which is something that, frankly, we're not doing such a good job of right now. So they can see, based upon what portion of their income that they would be paying, over what period of time, what the monthly payment would be, etc. So that is something that they would get immediate input from us on, and we will likely ask them to sign a printout of that just to make sure they understand what they're getting into. But we will have some back office verification of the income and the equity in the property.
How do you determine that? The equity in the property?
So the equity in the property would be, we're going to be using the DOF determined value of the property, since that's readily available to us. And then we are going to, from the title report, look at mortgages or liens,
Other liens.
anything, any liabilities to be subtracted from the value.
Okay. You mentioned in your testimony, Commissioner, about outreach and that being important. So what is the plan to do outreach at this point?
Well, that's something we want to aggressively pursue. As you know, we have a very aggressive outreach campaign at DOF, working with all elected officials. So we will continue that kind of outreach with elected officials and other communities. But we will also include in all of our notices all of our bills. So we have the tax license notice, for instance, like the 90 days, 60 days, 45 days, and so on. So every correspondence we're going to have, we're going to try to include information about the program. We will also engage what I call the traditional media as well as social media. Okay, a very aggressive campaign again to reach as many people. We'll also go in different ethnic, work with different ethnic media, go in different ethnic communities, basically to make sure they are aware of the program. So our goal is, we are working on a very aggressive campaign. Our outreach team is here, and they will provide you more detailed campaign. But for now, we're working on a very aggressive campaign that we could share with you as we begin to implement the program.
Will you work with other organizations or agencies?
Definitely.
Promote it as well?
Oh, definitely, yes.
Can the DOF use information it collects from payment plan applications to automatically enroll homeowners in exemption and abatement programs they're eligible for example, SHE? Or if not, how can DOF help taxpayers who are eligible for exemptions sign up for them?
I would not automatically enroll people because I would let taxpayers make their own decision whether or not they want to take because this is a loan technically so I would let them make their own decision. But however, as I said, we would try to use every single opportunity that we have to reach out to people who are struggling to pay the property taxes to make sure that they are fully aware of the program. We are also, as you know, we do a very aggressive campaign to make sure that taxpayers take advantage of all the exemption programs that we have, because this is, from our perspective, one way of ensuring that property taxes in New York is more or less affordable to a lot of taxpayers. So we'll continue to aggressively, market these programs to the taxpayers as much as we can.
The current maximum incomes for SHE and DHE is about $58,000, and the state's Enhanced Star program has an income limit of about $74,000. So can you tell us how you arrived at the $50,000 limit?
The $50,000, I mean, the SHE and all the programs that we have, the maximum benefits that you secure is at $50,000. After $50,000, you continue to get benefits, but they phase out. The benefit phase out after $50,000 to up to $58,000. So our goal was to find the maximum point, and then match it to make sure we're consistent across all of our programs.
Would DOF be supportive of indexing the threshold to some measure of inflation or median income in the city?
Well, this is something we could look in the future once we have the infrastructure in place, because as you can imagine, it's going to be a little complicated in terms of ensuring that on an annual basis we have to adjust the threshold. So again, as I say, I'm open to that kind of discussion. But to begin with, we have to start by having an infrastructure that we can handle to begin with. Once we do, we'll be open to this kind of discussion.
So all these programs are income restricted, and they'll be checked on an annual basis.
Yes.
And so if a homeowner goes over the $50,000 in any given year, what would happen to a taxpayer in the payment plan that experiences, like, let's say, a one-time windfall in terms of income?
Well, that's currently the way we design the program. Once you reach $50,000, you're technically out of the program, and I have to think about, because of that issue of if you have a one-time increase in income and you come right back to it, because this is something that we dealt with the SHE program. We addressed that issue because that was a technical problem for us. Again, we could come back to you with looking in terms of it is a one-time spike in income, and your income comes back to the normal flow. But currently, the way we have it, once your income exceeds $50,000, you will be out of the program. In other words, you're not going to be forced to pay. You're still going to be in a plan, but you're not going to take advantage.
Like if somebody gets a life insurance policy.
Yeah, as I said, we have to look into this aspect. Like we did for SHE and D. We had a similar problem with SHE and D, which we addressed. Squee injury.
So similarly, if a property owner misses the renewal deadline to renew the hardship payment plan, will there be any flexibility to allow them to re-enter the installment agreement?
Again, we will look into these issues, but currently we have what is the deadline we have right now? We haven't set up a deadline now, per se.
Right.
We haven't set up a deadline at this point in time. In terms of a fixed date, we don't have that yet. I think our goal is to make sure we continue to renew. The purpose of the renewal program is that we could obtain information about the income on an annual basis to see if the person is still qualified. But I don't think we have a date yet. I don't think in the law we have a specific date.
It's after January
After January 2019. Okay.
So can you just repeat that in the mic so we can get it?
So, go ahead.
It applies to agreements entered into after January 2019.
So it applies to agreements after January
2019.
2019.
That's what you have in the law now?
Okay.
In the legislation?
That's the effective date.
That's the effective date. The effective date is January 2019. But I think what the question was, what happened if you were to renew? Do we have an effective date for renewal in the legislation?
Or is it rolling?
Or is it rolling? Yeah. Oh, we'll get back to you. We'll get back to you on this.
Okay, let me just talk a little bit about the pre-considered intro that would require the Banking Commission to recommend and allow the council to adopt an interest rate that would be applicable to tax arrears for properties that are subject to a current installment agreement. This interest rate must be at least equal to the most recently determined federal short-term rate, most recently set at about 2.5%, which is commonly understood to represent the rate at which a short-term borrowing could be achieved in the unlikely instance that the city would have to borrow to cover the cost of these deferred payments. While I understand that you're still reviewing the details of the bill, I'd like to ask you generally about the concept of the bill. Does the administration view the interest rate as a penalty for late payment or as a way to cover the cost of non- or deferred payment?
The way I look at it is, I'm as concerned as you with respect to adding any undue burden on the taxpayers. So therefore, we always look for ways. That's the reason why we come up with the new plans that we introduce in the legislation. But the challenge that we have is, as you know, the reduction in the rate would have a significant impact on tax revenue. Okay. So, from my perspective, this is not something we should analyze in isolation. We should look at it in the context of a budget negotiation or discussion, rather than just isolate it. That's what, at this point in time, that's the way I would characterize it from my perspective.
Do you have an estimate of the fiscal impact of the legislation?
We're still working on it, but you also have to look at it not just from a property tax perspective, but in terms of the water authority, because they are forced to basically adopt the same rate that we are using. So the impact may not be as much on us, but for them it will be significant, because if they have to, that interest rate has to be used for everyone, not just for a segment, small segment. So from their perspective, it could be very high.
Okay, I'm going to let some council members ask questions. Councilmember Helen Rosenthal.
Thank you, Chair Drum. These are great things, great work you're doing, so thank you.
Thank you.
But I'm still going to just ask a quick question. Do you know the spread between what it costs the city to borrow money compared to what we will now be charging?
I don't have that information from the top of my head, but I could provide you that information.
Do you have a guess?
Again, as I said, it depends on which timing is different. Capital market changes daily for long-term capital. So I don't have.
I'm just wondering.
I don't have something on top of my head.
Okay.
But I could provide you that information.
Sure. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, good, and I forgot to announce that we were joined by council members Powers, Rosenthal, Matteo, Moya, and Cornegie. So thank you all for coming, and now we've been joined by Councilmember Van Bramer. Let me just go back. I have some questions about water bills. Does entering into one of these payment plans address taxpayer issues with water and sewer charges? And how can taxpayers be sure they are up to date on all of their property-related charges?
No, this has nothing to do with water and sewer. It's a separate, as you know, it's a separate entity.
Is there a way that the taxpayer can check that they're up to date on all of their payments that are owed to the city?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
Sure. Is there a way that taxpayers can be sure that they're up to date on all their property-related charges? How can they find out that information?
They can find out that information online or at our business centers.
Is it all at one site, one address?
Are you including the water charges? No, so right now it is not. No, the DEP runs a separate system.
Okay, a lot of constituents do see it as the same.
Yes,
Yeah, we know.
we understand.
But it's, one is an authority which is independent of the city per se, so that is always a challenge.
So did you reach out to DEP at all to see if they're willing to offer a similar hardship plan?
They have a hardship plan. They have a.
Yeah, so DEP has the Water Debt Assistance Program, which we do refer to in the testimony. That participation in that program would allow people to get the extenuating circumstances plan that we talk about. So that's one of the triggers for us accepting them. So if DEP has given, in effect, their version of a hardship plan, and if the homeowner meets the income qualifications, then they would be eligible for our plan.
How do you coordinate that with DEP?
When someone applies with us, we will be checking with DEP.
Are you reviewing DEP payment data to get a sense of who might benefit from those programs?
I'm sorry, could you be a little
Sure. Are
more
you reviewing
specific?
DEP payment data to get a sense of who might be eligible for these programs that we're talking about today?
We have not done it. We haven't done- our focus has been on creating the policy.
Will that be something you do?
But that's once we put the administration in place,
Moving
Yeah,
forward?
that would be one of the things that
That-
we'll be looking into.
We would definitely use that as to create our marketing plan and know who we want to do outreach towards.
Okay, so as written, the installment agreements will be available to Class 1 and Class 2 condo owners. So what is DOF's position on expanding the eligibility to small Class 2 buildings, such as those who may live in what is categorized as a 4-unit building, but is used as a 1-family or 2-family home?
Currently, we don't have them because in mind. And again, because the focus has been on trying to protect homeowners with incomes of less than $50,000. As you know, many of these properties are technically classified as commercial under current classification right now.
So we still would like to discuss that 4 to 6 family owner occupied situation with you as well.
We could
because
discuss.
it might just fall outside of the legislation that we're
Sure.
discussing. Our staff shared with you a report from the California Legislative Analyst Office that reviewed the state's program of deferred payments for low-income seniors. One of the findings was that the state, which charges a 7% non-compounded rate, earned a profit on these programs, which presumably the city would make as well. That report also cited the relatively high 7% interest rate as a potential explanation for the low usage of that state's program. Do you believe that a lower rate would encourage enrollment and usage of these assistance programs?
Again, I don't know if these are price sensitive per se, these programs, so that it's an inference you would make to say, if you lower the interest rate, more people participate. Based on our own experiences, when people are having trouble paying their property taxes, they are about to go into a lien sale. That's when they are looking for a payment plan to get out of a lien sale. So, I haven't seen any evidence, any study that basically link interest rate with participation in this kind of program. But again, I wouldn't make, to me, that would be speculation on my part to argue that there is a correlation between the two.
How soon after a tax payment is missed are homeowners notified of that?
Chef,
They are notified in their next bill. So typically that would be the quarterly statement of account. For this plan, we plan to offer quarterly or monthly bills, so we would be notifying them at the time of the next bill.
I think we are done with this portion. I want to thank you for coming in and giving testimony. We look forward to putting the finishing touches on this piece of legislation.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you again for coming in. I'd now like to call up Arthur Burkle from Legal Services New York City, Oda Friedheim, I'm sorry if I mispronounced your name, from the Legal Aid Society, Leo Goldberg from the Center for New York City Neighborhoods, and Robbie Ozo. Okay, thank you all for coming in. Would you like to start over there?
Actually, we were going to defer first to Leo Goldberg.
Okay, fine. Okay, that's fine.
And then chime in.
Okay, very good.
Good morning. Turn on the mic, please. Good morning. My name is Leo Goldberg. I am Policy and Research Manager at the Center for New York City Neighborhoods. Thank you, Chair Drum, and the committee for holding today's hearing. The center works with LMI homeowners. We coordinate foreclosure prevention and housing counseling, and we have a foreclosure prevention loan program called the Mortgage Assistance Program that, in addition to helping homeowners with tax arrears, also helps people with, in addition to mortgage arrears, helps homeowners with tax arrears. And the program looks similar to the senior deferred option, so we have some experience in this area. So I'll just briefly say we are really pleased that the council is taking this up. This is an area that we think is vitally important. There are tens of thousands of lower income homeowners who experience really severe tax burdens. You may have seen a report from the comptroller's office recently that found that lower income homeowners have much higher tax burdens as a proportion of their income than higher income people, and this is a result of the property tax system and tax caps, etc. But the result is that the lower income you have as a homeowner, regardless of the value in your property, the greater strain you have. We did a survey of homeowners in East New York last year, and we found that only 18% reported that they were able to save any money after paying all their bills, with the rest either breaking even or drawing on credit cards or other debt just to meet regular expenses. So there's a really widespread level of financial precariousness in the city, and we think that this is one good step towards helping folks address that. So that said, we think that in some of the specifics of the bill, there's some work to be done to make sure that's as effective as possible, and that it is providing the assistance that it sets out to do. So I have more detail in the testimony, and I know the folks around me are going to go into more detail as well, so I'll do kind of a high-level overview of some of the areas we think could be improved. So one is reducing barriers in the application and renewal process. And I think the chair's questions got at some of this, but assuming that applicants are going to be able to take on a title search and some of the other requirements, could be problematic. Even though with the title search requirement, there is an option that the DOF does it on behalf of the homeowner and is reimbursed. Even the requirement on the face of the application might be discouraging to a number of homeowners. We have to assume that a lot of people are already in a financial strain and perhaps other strains in their life when they're going through this application process, and really making this as simple as possible with as few barriers as possible is going to be really important. And something like hiring someone to do a title search can be really discouraging. Another piece would be the requirement that all owners on the property sign the application. We'd hope to see some kind of exemption to that requirement. There's a lot of people with complicated family situations, and we need some acknowledge of that in the application process here. And then the chair's questions got at a point that I think is really crucial, which is the requirement that there are annual renewals of the application, especially for seniors. We imagine that many seniors would drop out of the program accidentally. DOF has a lot of sources of data that it could draw on to verify the ongoing eligibility of these homeowners in the program, especially if it was brought in line with SHE or the Enhanced STAR program. So you could link it closer to these existing exemption programs, cross-reference, and make sure that homeowners are eligible in that way. We also have some concerns about the net equity requirement. While I understand why it's useful in the senior case, I actually don't understand why it's useful for the non-senior options and would exclude some homeowners that otherwise could be helped by the program. And then coming back to the income eligibility question, like I said, I think it would make sense to bump up the income eligibility for the seniors up to the other programs that exist. And we looked at application data to the New York Mortgage Assistance Program for non-seniors looking for help with their tax liens. And we found that 42% of the applicants were above $50,000 in income. So there is demand for this exact kind of help above that 50,000 threshold, and I think we should really consider raising it. The city is going to get this tax revenue back eventually. It's a well-structured program. There'll be a lien on the property. So why not raise the income to meet the need where it is? And I should say the New York MAP program is going to be fully subscribed in the spring. So these measures like these are going to be really important to fill that hole. And just the last couple notes I would make is this points to an issue with the broader property tax system that we hope that the council takes on as well, which these installment plans will help people once they're already in trouble. We would also hope to see stronger provisions that link people's property taxes to their incomes before they're in trouble. So that might look like circuit breakers, homesteading exemptions to make sure that a homeowner in a gentrifying neighborhood isn't priced out of their home or put in a situation where they need to come to DOF for help just because of the circumstances around their property. A lot of cities in the US have systems like this, circuit breaker exemptions, etc., and we should really look at that more. And finally, notice, and especially if someone is exiting the installment plan agreement or at risk of defaulting on it, it's really critical to provide a serious level of notice. We see this with our clients and our partners' clients all the time, that just because a letter is sent to someone telling them that they're behind on a bill does not mean that they're going to read that or understand it. So housing counselors, legal services, having people ready to assist these homeowners is going to be really key. So thank you for the opportunity to testify, and thank you for advancing this legislation.
Just quick before we go to the next person, what's the cost today for a title search, approximately?
I don't know.
I think 500 approximately.
Not much, no, okay.
Yeah.
And what would be the suggested level to raise the eligibility level to? It's 58,000 something for the
Right.
for SCREE, I guess, in D. Did you make a suggestion?
I think for the seniors, raising it to the SHE level would be good. We could also raise it to the enhanced star level. I'm not sure what the city loses in doing that, which is higher. Don't actually have it in front of me.
74,000.
74,000. And for the non-seniors, I think we could do the same. There's plenty of folks who need help in that income range, and like I said, the revenue's all coming to the city. So.
Okay, thank you. Next, please.
All right. Good morning. My name is Oda Friedhelm. Yes, you didn't mangle my name. I'm speaking today on behalf of the Legal Aid Society. We have been involved in foreclosure prevention since actually 2000. And in the last many years, we have particularly dealt with many senior homeowners that actually had incredible burdens in terms of property taxes and also water and sewer charges. So we are very familiar with some of these issues, and therefore we really welcome and commend the City Council for taking this important step to create a program that would be both flexible and income-based. We think that is a very, very significant step and would certainly assist many homeowners. And we certainly appreciate the Department of Finance recognition of the problem, which has not always been the case, and we really see this as, a significant step in the right direction. Now, based on our experience with especially senior homeowners, but just generally low-income homeowners, including low-income condo owners. We practice in the Bronx, and we represent many people, for example, in the Parkchester condominiums, as well as others. Based on our experience, we do have concerns similar to basically what Leo Goldberg already articulated, which is that some of the requirements would be both burdensome and possibly exclude exactly those homeowners that need it the most. I would say, as Leo already mentioned, if a homeowner sees the word title report, I think they're going to run in the opposite direction, because they're really title report, that is a very legal, abstract concept. That's not something that your typical homeowner would actually understand. To even, I think the city, if in fact a title report is necessary, then that's something that the city should automatically take on. It's not even clear to us why it's so important. It became clear during, I believe, the testimony of the commissioner that it's to basically get to a net equity amount rather than, we're not clear where the lien would actually be placed. Would it be after existing mortgages, or that's not very clear from the legislation. In any event, I think title report, if indeed necessary, should be done by the city automatically, and as part of the application process. Ditto for appraisals for condos. Then I also want to address the issue, which is another requirement that, and Leo touched on that, that all homeowners, all property owners sign onto the application. Well, that is probably one of the thorniest issues, and we don't have ready answers to that. We understand the idea behind it, but there's got to be a more flexible approach. I mean, we see many variations. It's not just complicated family relations. There are issues of domestic violence, where the perpetrator of the violence is obviously not going to cooperate, in fact, cannot cooperate. So in addition, as part of past predatory practices, there were many instances where, unfortunately, brokers pushed people into recruiting co-signers who never had an intention to live there to get on the deed and also, take on the note and mortgage. So there's many variations on this theme, but that's going to be a big, big hurdle, and that's going to be definitely addressed. And we would be happy to work with the city council on figuring out ways to deal with that. And as Leo already said, the renewal, of course, is another thing that is burdensome. I think our experience is really grounded in the fact that the many seniors that come to our office, sometimes with mortgage problems, but often with tax problems, first thing I do is I check, well, you are over such and such age, you're over 65, and your income is such and such. Are you already getting the senior homeowner exemption, SHE? I'm telling you, 90% are not. We then go and have to fill out an application. So in terms of even, before we even get into this really overall good plan, there's got to be, I don't know, a different kind of outreach to seniors, because the problem is that the events that the Department of Finance arranges, the more vulnerable homeowners, unfortunately, do not find out about it, do not come to it, and therefore are not often able to avail themselves of, SHE, similar with DRE, the disability program. So back to, what is being proposed here in terms of these payment plans. We were glad to hear that the commissioner spoke about aggressive outreach, but somehow it still often falls short of reaching exactly those homeowners that are most in need, which are often seniors, they're often bedridden or homebound, et cetera, et cetera. And, we would certainly like to cooperate in any shape we can to reach such homeowners, but that is still an open issue. Finally, and I think Leo touched on that too, the notice requirement, that it's not addressed in the bill, but there has to be some very clear notices, and they have to be obviously very easily to be understood, and so on and so on. So in short, we see some concerns based on our practice, but we still overall commend the City Council for taking this really important step. Thank you very much for allowing us to testify today.
Thank you very much. Next, please.
Good morning. Good morning, members of the City Council and Chair Drum. Thank you for inviting us to testify this morning. My name is Arthur Werkel. I'm a staff attorney in the Foreclosure Prevention and CD Unit at Bronx Legal Services, which is a program of Legal Services NYC. Like my colleague, Ms. Friedhand at Legal Aid, LSNYC is the largest, or one of the largest providers of free civil legal services in the country, with offices in all 5 boroughs. We've assisted over 12,000 homeowners since 2009 in foreclosures, in discriminatory lending, and abusive mortgage servicing actions. We have an informed perspective on the challenges that homeowners face in all aspects of the judicial foreclosure process, including tax foreclosures. We're also particularly sensitive to the needs of large numbers of low and moderate income homeowners who confront a range of legal issues whom we may not be able to assist because the need outstrips the available resources. And as has already been mentioned by my colleagues, we commend the efforts of the committee and the Department of Finance to create this legislation, which will help many homeowners in need. However, we also have reservations about the current wording and the design of the law of the proposed legislation, which I go into detail in my paper testimony, and I'd like to just go over some basic overview of those issues. As has already been mentioned, we are concerned that there are significant barriers to entry into the program. Again, the title search requirement is onerous for homeowners who are already behind on their property taxes, while the Department of Finance can add this cost to their debt to be repaid. That sort of defeats the purpose of assisting the homeowner when you're increasing the debt, which will accrue interest. The requirement that all property owners sign on to the application can be difficult when some may be unavailable, some may be deceased. This current wording in the legislation does not provide for property successors and heirs that could participate if the original property owner is no longer there. Another issue is that the income limit does not account for the property's location. I echo the chair's concern that it would be more reasonable for the income limit to be set to area median income, since income can vary widely across our city. It would also make more sense to set the income level according to the number of property owners. It doesn't really make sense for one property owner to be bound to 50%, $50,000, as well as three property owners, which we've seen. Their income would be necessarily higher, and they shouldn't be barred just because of that arbitrary limit. We're also concerned about the net equity requirement that requires that the liens not exceed 25 or 50% of a property's net equity. This is also concerning for senior citizens who may have taken out a reverse mortgage. A reverse mortgage is a mortgage that takes out of the equity of the property. And their expenses, the payments that the senior makes, are taxes, are property taxes and insurance. If the senior is now barred from participating in this program because their reverse mortgage took out more equity, that's one of the people that this bill is intending to help who would be excluded. Another issue is generally to facilitate participation. Again, I echo my colleagues' concerns that an annual renewal requirement is very onerous, especially for senior citizens. There's also an inherent conflict between the net equity requirement and the strict income limit. On one hand, a homeowner is limited by the income. They cannot earn more than $50,000. On the other hand, if the net equity of the liens is above 50 or 25%, they're barred. A homeowner would be incentivized to earn more money to pay down the net equity, but then they would be excluded because they earn more than $50,000. That is a conflict that we don't see it has to be there. There doesn't have to be a net equity limit because even homes who are underwater should be able to participate in this program. That's a homeowner that is very vulnerable, that is likely behind on property taxes, that the city is losing money out on, and will be automatically excluded because of the net equity requirement. Doesn't seem to serve a purpose for the DOF either. It again seems that the approach after the default is punitive in that once a homeowner has defaulted on an installment plan for whatever reason, in order to cure that default, they have to pay 20% of the liens. But these liens include water and sewer charges and other liens, whereas the initial program is only for tax arrears. So now they're having to pay 20% of a potentially much larger chunk of debt that wasn't part of the original installment plan. And now if they are not able to cure, then they'll be barred for 5 years. Here's a homeowner who has been punished because they weren't able to make an installment plan to begin with, who then had to make a much larger payment, and now will not be eligible for 5 years. They will likely go through tax foreclosure. Another concern that we flagged was the provision allowing the Department of Finance to record installment plans with ACRIS. That should be eliminated altogether. It doesn't seem to serve a purpose for the Department of Finance or for homeowners. It's already a fact that tax property liens are in first position. They would not be subordinated in case of a tax foreclosure. However, filing this installment plan with ACRIS exposes the homeowner to potential harm from scammers who can search for these agreements. Property tax records are public, but they're not searchable. But filing these kinds of agreements on ACRIS would make them searchable to third parties. An example of how this could play out is in our testimony, in which we illustrate an example. A predatory investor can learn of a recent installment plan through ACRIS, can target the apparent non-resident heirs of a distressed property and persuade them to sell their interest next to nothing. Then that investor could seek a partition action, which has very few defenses, against the homeowner who is residing in the property. That's a kind of scheme that LSNYC has encountered multiple times, especially in Brooklyn. By filing the installment agreement on ACRIS, the mortgage servicer can become aware of the tax arrears, choose to pay the tax arrears in full, and then tack that on the homeowner's bill at the next mortgage bill in full, which defeats the purpose of the installment plan. Finally, if a homeowner is looking for an alternative of selling the property, but a potential investor sees this kind of installment agreement on ACRIS, that can frustrate those efforts. We also felt that the swift 2-year sunset provision that states that the law would take effect in January of 2019 and sunset in December 2020 is very brief. It creates uncertainty for all parties. A more reasonable lifespan would be a 5-year sunset provision so that potential participants can have security that this will be around in 2 years. In closing, I'd like to say that there will inevitably be hiccups in the rollout of an ambitious new program like this. At the same time, it should be looked at more closely and it should be modified with some of the issues that my colleagues and I have flagged. It's impossible to foresee and provide for every situation and contingency that can arise, but given the Council's intention and the Department of Finance's intention in creating this program to help homeowners, these hiccups, when they arise, should be resolved with the homeowner's interest in mind and not just with the city's bottom line in mind. Thank you again for inviting us to testify this morning, and we would also be excited to continue working with the committee to craft a more homeowner-friendly bill.
Okay, thank you. Next, please.
Hello, my name is Ralph Yazzo, and I'm a member of the Community Education Council in District 16. And all these things, and also a computer developer, programmer, all these things that our colleagues here are saying can be solved with software, right? A title search can be done with software, everything. And so also the payment tax history, we already created a site called tax.titleforce.org that shows the Department of Finance's history of payment, and you can compare your tax payment to your neighbors. And what we see is that Queens and Staten Island are literally paying $8,000, $9,000 in tax on average, while Park Slope and Williamsburg are paying $3,000 on Class 1 property, which makes no sense whatsoever. Why are we not solving these problems? This is what's causing some of these issues, right? So I have data right here, or information right here, about the assessment ratio, right? New York City has changed this assessment ratio, which seems to be, I wish the Commissioner of Finance was here, because I'd like to ask him, how has it changed from 18, around 1980, it was 25%. It was lowered to 18% in 1985. Then it was lowered to 12% in 1989. And in 1992, the assessment ratio was lowered to 8%. And then in 2004, it was lowered to 6%. If we compare ourselves to Nassau County has lowered the assessment ratio down to 0.25%. So what that would do is even out. So the people in Queens would pay the appropriate amount of tax, and the people in Park Slope and Williamsburg would pay more because, their property is more valuable. And then we'd continue all these programs for seniors. Not everyone in Park Slope is a senior, so we need to be more fair to our people. And so the law, if we read the law, New York State law says that requires the tax be based on each property's market value, but allows assessed values to be set at a fraction of the market value, but it must be uniform. We do not have a uniform rate, right? The people in Park Slope, Williamsburg, and probably parts of Manhattan are paying an assessment ratio of 1%, while the people in Queens are paying 6%. And so I suggest that we have a community budget council that, because you guys need feedback from real people. Because I listened to the commissioner say, oh yes, we do outreach. It's exactly what our colleague said here, is that they do not reach the people. I walk on my block, and we're trying to get something for backyard access, so I had to talk to everybody on our block. There's people 70 years old. I said, do you live in this house? He said, yes, I've been here all my life. I said, you don't have the SHRI or GRI or any of these programs at all. He said, really? I had his son, and I showed him the forms. I signed up my neighbor for Shri. She didn't know anything about it. Her son had all the things, but he didn't share with his mother. So the point is, we need outreach, not just, if we wait for the Department of Finance to do this stuff, they're never going to do it, right? They don't even, you go on their site, you can't even find out your tax history, right? We did it graphically where we show the rates and you can compare to your neighbors, you can see outliers, I don't understand. We need to open it up to real people, programmers. I'm willing to volunteer. I talked to the borough president in Brooklyn. I volunteer to help explain tax bills. I go to the advisory commission. I listen to the people come up and say, the poor person came up and said, my market value went down, but my tax went up. Why? And nobody even answered her. It's because of the law, the way the law is written. So I could go on forever, but I'll stop just out of respect for everyone. And I wish Councilperson Matteo was here because he voted against the tax increase, right? He's the only one, the only voice that said, this is outrageous. Why are we increasing taxes on Class 1 property? Why? It doesn't make any sense. It's backwards. We set a budget and then we tax the people depending on how much we've increased the budget, right? 10%. Well, only a monopoly can do that, right? Businesses can't do that. They can't just increase their budget and say, look, force the customers to pay. So we need the budget to be opposite, right? We need to look at what the revenue is and then set the budget, not set the budget and then set the revenue or force the monopoly taxpayers, and then we go through all these liens and things like this. I am very disappointed in the whole system, so I just want to voice that. Thank you, Commissioner, or Chairman.
Not a commissioner.
Chairman.
That's fine. I'm sure you've given testimony before the tax.
Yes,
commission?
twice, yes.
Okay.
And the issue is that I don't think, there's just an advisory commission, right? So, and do you think they're going to advise something? I'd like to know the history of this. I would love to communicate with your office and find out who has control, because the issue I have is whoever I talk to say it's the other person, right? So if I talk to state people, they say, oh, it's the Department of Finance. If I talk to the Department of Finance, they say it's the state.
I'm talking about the Property Tax Reform Commission, right?
Yes, I spoke there twice,
okay.
right? But the thing is, this Office of Taxpayer Bill of Rights, that's another feedback. I wrote to them because we in Bed-Stuy bought a dilapidated house, right? We repaired it, and we get socked with 125% tax increase for repairing a building that you would think we'd be rewarded for doing that. Philadelphia has tax abatement programs that are automatic. You fix your house, they want you to fix houses. Here in New York City, we punish people who fix houses unless you're a developer who gets the 421A abatement and 30-year, so they don't pay taxes for 30 years. But we're going to be, our taxes are increased 125% forever, right? It never goes down. And nowhere in New York City do they account for depreciation. A repair and an improvement are two different things. If you have a house that's just a shell and you fix it, that's not really an improvement. That's a repair of, you had to do that. You can't live in a shell with an open roof, and right? So the law says improvement, but there has to be a distinction between improvement and repair, right? It's just common sense. Philadelphia does it. Everyone else. Here in New York City, you have to apply before you do this stuff. And how are no one knows this stuff, right? We don't know. A small homeowner doesn't know that they have to apply for 421A, right? So if you have any questions, I would love to share information with the office. I write to Councilman Ballone, I write to Matteo, I write the people that actually are voting against the tax increases. But I'd love to, I've talked to Levin, I've talked to Carnegie, and maybe not Carnegie, he's my council person, but all of them, I try, but you never get any response. We need software to show. We have a website, it's very simple. It shows your tax history. It shows everyone's, you can compare against the mayor. You can compare Maliatakis and the mayor. You can compare them. and it shows very graphically what's happening. Go on the Department of Finance website and try to find your tax history, your payment history. It looks like an accounting worksheet. It's got, it's almost impossible. We do it graphically, and we give the information, and so you can put it into a spreadsheet. You can look at your name. You can all that stuff. So I would love to help, because we need a what's it called, a hackathon about, because if you go to the department's website, Department of Finance website, the assessment role is hidden deep into the website, and it's hidden inside an Access database, which you have to, no one even uses Microsoft Access anymore. You have to extract it out, and I took that whole thing and put it into a real database and made it accessible to everyone, and nobody cares. It's sad.
Anyway, thank you very much for
Thank you.
coming in. I appreciate your testimony, and you are doing something by being here today and giving testimony, so thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you to this panel. Thank you. Okay, we were joined by Councilmember Kumbo and Councilmember Gibson as well.
It's so sad.
And I believe with that, this meeting is adjourned at 12:24 in the afternoon. Thank you.
They never changed the clock. It's 11:20.
Oh, excuse me.